your knowledge about asset allocation. And now we will move on to our next topic, and that is the economic impact of presidential election. And we have here the former Chief Market Strategist at Equitable PCI Bank's Treasury Department, in which he is also the leading advocate in creating and running a wide range of educational programs for private and institutional investors. He is also a regular commentator on economic and financial market issues on ANC, Bloomberg, and BBC. Let us all welcome the first Vice President and Chief Market Strategist of BDO Unibank Incorporated, Mr. Jonathan Ravelas.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Okay, so my topic's about the implications and eventually regarding the elections. So the first things first, if elections were held today, okay, who would you vote for president? Okay, wait, let's do it orderly. You have to remember that what do we call a Navy ship of the Philippines? Okay, we name them as BRP. Barko ng Republika ng Pilipinas. The three major contenders in the election today are those initials. BRP, Binay, Rojas, and Co. So let's do it in that order. Anybody who wants to vote for the Vice President of the Philippines as President of the Philippines, please raise your hand. Binay tayo ngayon. Okay. So you're all afraid of the dark. Okay?
Opo. Sige po.
So now,
Ito po, dito.
We have the card for the package.
Ay, urong po kayo ng konti, sir. Medyo malapit kasi. Okay. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. One more. 1, 2, 3.
okay, who's going to vote for Mar Rojas? Raise your hand. Po? Raise po? Okay. So wala pang conviction. So kung si Duterte? Right. Okay, don't worry. I don't know yet. So anybody who wants for Miriam, Defensor Santiago? Oy. Okay. So rest assured that that is the pulse that I get in any forum that I attend. It's still a work in progress. I think the more significant ones will eventually be done by the survey in December. So if you remember in the 2010 elections, we've seen a lot of activities that changed the landscape. The early front-runner was eventually, at that time, was Manny Villar, and then eventually changed to the current president. Okay, so I'll slightly talk about the market outlook at present. Okay, for those who are familiar with Bernie Villegas, Dr. Villegas of the University of Asia and the Pacific, he mentioned that whoever becomes the next president, okay, the economy will continue to grow, and I tend to agree. Earlier, there was a statement of what stocks to invest, and some mentioned one of the most important companies in the Philippines today, because it's Christmas. Okay, the way I spell Christmas is Krismas, okay, which means Savior and Messiah. Yung pong ibig sabihin ng SM. Yan. Okay. So we'll talk about slightly the market outlook. So eventually, at this point in time, a lot of people are confused with the present situation. So right now, global growth is eventually being challenged on the part of emerging markets. Okay? Developed markets like the US, Europe, and Japan are struggling on their growth. They're growing between 1 to 2%. Okay? While emerging markets are growing between 5 to 6%. Okay? So having a growth of at least 5 to 6% is great. Okay? That's why a lot of investors are here in Asia. Okay? Then eventually you have the rising dollar and the impending rate hike in the US. Okay? And the last is the falling commodity prices. So these are the three major events in the global economy that eventually creates volatility. Of course, the main challenger here, or the challenge, is eventually China. They're slowing down. Okay? In the early 1990s, they were growing at 10 to 14%. Now they're slowly decelerating to around 5 to 6%. So that's eventually the concern everybody has. Okay? But world growth continues to highlight that things are going to be better. World will eventually be growing between 3 to around 3.5% over the next 2 years. You have to understand that before the Asian financial crisis and the US financial crisis, world growth was doing between 4 to 5%. So now, the new normal seems to be between 3 to 3.5%. Okay? So, major economies like the US, Europe, and Japan, their normal growth now should be between closer to the 3%. Okay? You have to remember that recently, the Trans-Pacific Partnership has been signed. Okay? Roughly 60% of the people who signed that agreement contributes to 60% of the world economy. Okay? So, eventually, looking at Asia having a growth of between 5 to 6%, we offer a very stellar performance in terms of growth. Okay? So, the next question is the rising dollar. If their economy, American economy is improving, then definitely, we will eventually see them slowly taking out the excess money that is in their system. If you remember the US financial crisis, so much money has been flowed to their economy and they need to slowly withdraw that. Otherwise, it will create asset bubbles. Just like what's happening today in the Philippines. There's so much money. Okay? And one of the most important things today is trying to understand a yield that is good for the investor. Okay? What do you think is the yield? And I often tell people, it must be at least higher than inflation rate. In fact, if we were to look at the Philippines, that minimum return should at least be 5.5%, which is average 5-year inflation plus 1.5%, which represents real interest rates. So at present, 5-year rates are way below that 5.5%. Okay? In the US, there is an expectation of a rate hike and has caused the dollar to strengthen. Okay? Last year, the Philippines has been preparing for that event. The central bank has started raising interest rates. That's why the peso has slightly performed better than its peers. Okay? As you know, Indonesian rupiah and the rest of the other countries have depreciated by more than 20%. Okay? Malaysia and Indonesia have depreciated, but the Philippines has only depreciated by close to 5%. Okay? So the outlook for the Philippines, I've just actually looked at 5 economic indicators. So GDP is like the speedometer of a car. Okay? Ano ba dapat natakbuhan ng kotse? Okay? Dito po sa Metro Manila, the minimum speed is 60. Di ba? Sa Davao po, 30 na. Ayan. Hindi dahil Duterte, ha? Hindi. But eventually, it's 30 kilometers per hour. So, the Philippines should be growing by at least 5% to 6%, which is practically 3 times our population growth. In the early 1990s, our population growth was 2%. Now it's 1.7%. Okay, thanks to the evolution of mobile phones. Okay, dati po, mahirap po yung magkaroon ng cellphone. So in other countries, parts of the country, iba po ang hinahawakan nila. Okay, ngayon po, tingnan nyo, bumaba na. Imagine yourselves, how many times do you hold your phone today than you hold your partners? Diba? Ang average po ng bawat Pilipino na humawak ng telepono is 150 times. Okay? In my survey, most of the time, they hold their partners in a day at least 10 times. Okay? So, the other thing is inflation right now is a blessing. Because of the low commodity prices, inflation has gone down to 0.4% in September. Sad to say, this scenario will not stay forever. And again, this is a scenario where people tend to liken 2015 to 1997. Bakit po? Dahil po sa El Nino. The severe impact of El Nino, ito sabihin nyo may bagyo ngayon. No? The mere fact that the threat of El Nino in 1997 caused rice prices to rise to 100 pesos per kilo. That one of the first things President Joseph Estrada did then was to create the rolling stores. Okay? Right now, that is a threat to inflation. When there is an election, okay, because there's so much spending, inflation also rises. So we think inflation will normalize next year closer to 3.5%. Okay? And at the same time, we think commodity prices will also bottom out. Okay? Remember that El Nino is not just in the Philippines. It's affecting the rest of Asia. Okay? So, we're very much linked to commodities. So, if commodities were to recover early next year, then definitely our inflation rate will rise. Okay? We think that the trend of the dollar will continue over the next few years. Okay? In fact, another 3 more years of a strong dollar. And a lot of people will say, isn't a strong peso better for us or a weak peso? Ask yourselves. A majority of our spending as a country is driven by OFW remittances and BPOs. The more we become attractive to investors, more investors will come to the country. Weaker peso makes more people go to the malls and spend, particularly for the OFWs. Okay? That's been happening for the past so many years. Okay? That's why slightly weaker peso adds a boost in the economy. Okay? And then for interest rates, we're expecting that given the defensive expectations of rising US interest rates, we will see adjustments in interest rates moving forward. For financial planners, this is good or bad? This is good. Okay? If you are insurance companies, low interest rates are bad for you. Diba? Kasi you invest in long term. Imagine that your long-term rates today are single digit between 8 to 10%. Swerte ka kung yan ang yield mo. Right now, the average 20-year is close to 5.5%. So imagine, minus your inflation. How much will you get? Diba? So, this is the reality. Rising interest rates is just around the corner. Of course, this year, we don't see the stock market as positive. Okay, we think that 7.3 is the most conservative view at this point in time. With all of these uncertainties, the rate hike, the China slowdown, but moving forward, I'm looking at 8.5 to 9,000. over the next 2 years. So what will drive the story? Okay? We're the sunniest economy in Asia. Okay? What has happened in the last so many years is that if we were to view the Republic of the Philippines like a financial statements, we've done 3 things. One, as a shareholder of a company, when we invest in a stock, we think of 3 things. The management of the company thinks of its shareholders. Number 2, you want consistent growth of the company. Okay? Third, you want something that is sustainable. Okay? It's not a jackpot. It's not one time. You think you want to do it every time. Okay? And the Philippines, since 2010, has been a turnaround story. Again, driven by OFWs. Earlier, David Lee Q talked about the prospects of the BPO sector. It's creating a lot of activities in the economy. Okay? For those who have been coming from the provinces, sino po yung originally po galing ng Visayas and Mindanao and have relocated to Manila? Please raise your hand. Okay? Because this will be the few times that you will probably see that event happening. Okay? With the proliferation of call centers, it eventually creates new communities in other parts of the country. Never have we seen this in the last 35 years. Okay? That we're seeing growth in Visayas and Mindanao. If you remember Ondoy in 2009, that greatly affected 70% of our economy because they were all concentrated to Luzon. Right now, given these call centers and other real estate companies, malls that have opened, the contribution of Luzon has gone down by 10% to 60%. Things are moving in the Vismin region. Okay, so this is something that has not happened in the last 35 years. Dati mga lalaki lang ang pwedeng magtrabaho after 9 to 5. Yun nga lang, patay sindi. Ngayon, 24/7 na, may lusot ka na. Di ba? So there is a growing population and a growing middle class. This is supporting 70% of your economy, which is consumer spending. Okay? Pag humihina po yung piso, marami pong pumupunta katulad po dito sa SMX Aura. Okay? At a range of around 1,572 people per minute po ang naglalakad sa mall namin, sa SM. Pag lumalakas naman po yung piso, bumabagsak yan minsan to as low as 1,510. Bakit po? Kasi yung pera ng OFW lumiliit. Their spending power is less. Okay? So, there's another thing that when we talk about sustainability, the government invested. And Anton mentioned this earlier. It's eventually the K-12 program. Next year, the first graduates of K-12 will eventually graduate. And moving forward, we can now manufacture the right workforce. Most of the companies that you work for can now, through your HR, will tell government, over the next 2 to 3 years, ito yung demand ko ng klaseng tao. Accountant, kailangan ko ng business graduate. Sila na yung magbibigay ng demand. So most of the time, you will get a job. Okay? So when we talk about OFW remittances, which is between 8 to 10 million Filipinos outside the Philippines, okay? They contribute 23 billion. Okay, right now, BPO sector accounts for close to around 16 to 17 billion and close to 1 million pa lang yung employed. Okay? Even in the PEZA zone, which contributes the exports, roughly 2 million people are employed dito. Okay, there are other aspects of this BPO that people don't talk about. And let me talk about it in 30 seconds. The social cost of a family that is eventually all here lessens the risk of crime. Okay? Unlike yung OFW family, may broken family, but this is the social cost. Right now, because of the BPO, it's creating a lot of jobs. And most of those jobs, 100% ng gastos dito. Okay? Kaya nasasabi ko, ang bahay ni Juan de la Cruz lumaki na. How many of you still entertain at home? How many of you still entertain at home? Pag may kaibigan po kayo, ito po yung time. Kung may restaurant kayo, November 1 is the beginning of a lot of these activities. People eventually have a get-together, and they don't do it at home. Where do they do it? Sa mall, sa buffet, and that's creating spending. Okay? So, eventually, in terms of inflation and interest rates, makikita nyo, we've reached bottom. How low can it go? We're not the US that interest rates are 0.25%. We've actually done that in 2012. Okay? So, this is eventually what's driving your economy today. Food, retail, and construction. And the real estate sector. That's one driving it. So what are the risks? Growth challenges remain in the developed countries, geopolitical noise, and the lingering uncertainty of rate hikes. So, the thrilla in Manila next year. Is this important? Do you think this is relevant? Talaga? Okay. This is the latest pulse survey, okay, which continues to favor Grace Poe as your next president. Okay? So, do they really matter? Again, I ask you. Okay? Why? Because this is the stock market cycle from 1986 all the way to 2010. You see that there is a red line in the middle. For a president, 72 months po ang term ng presidente. Okay? So when we go to the 36 months, that's the first half. Okay? Majority of the presidents or the stock market tends to peak towards the second half. But there are few that eventually delivers the bacon in the first half. Like the dwarf. Kilala niyo po ba yung dwarf? Okay. Diba? So, again, another one is Fidel Ramos. Okay? Okay, pag titingnan nyo, meron pong code. Madali pong ma-predict ang presidente ng Pilipinas. Okay? Tandaan nyo lang po itong 6 characters. ELOSON. Okay? Sa lahat po ng tatakbong presidente, isa lang po ang meron yan. Si Manuel Rojas. May EL siya, which means like Fidel Ramos. Isipin niyo po lahat ng presidente ng Pilipinas except 2. Emilio Aguinaldo, hindi naman siya elected. Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo was elected Vice President of the Philippines and eventually assumed the presidency in 2001. Okay? Benigno Simeon Aquino. Corazon Aquino. Okay? So, isipin niyo madali. So, alam niyo na kung sino yung susunod na Vice President. Okay? So, in terms of growth, you'll notice that the biggest growth is in the last 2 presidents. Okay? 5.1% and the present president at 6.3% on their average terms. Okay? With Estrada being the lowest at 2.7%. Okay? So makikita nyo, from GMA all the way to President Aquino, we've been doing the right things. Okay? So does election matter? 3 months? 6 months? 9 months? Please look at the 9 months. Kasi ito po yung 100 days ng presidente. Sort out. After, people tend to check after 9 months what has he done. And normally this is well reflected. But look at 1 year after. Okay? Whether it's Estrada, whether it's GMA, whether it's Pinoy. 1 year after, things are getting better. Simple lang. Growing population, growing middle class, strong OFW, and BPO. Ganun lang po kasimple. Okay? But right now, where are we in this cycle? Okay? And some people ask me, are we going to go for a bear market? Okay? So, where are we now in the cycle? I think we've seen a peak. Okay? And in terms of the elections, you'll notice that 1 year after, things are getting better. So these two charts are telling us something. What is it telling us? It's all about time. Kahit kanina, the previous speaker was asking, what is the first thing that you should ask your client? Tanong niyo muna, how much time does he have? If he will invest in real estate, in stocks, di ba? Importante yung time. We can't go back in time. Okay? So, timing is eventually the most important part. Okay? Whether we talk about the election period, whether we talk about the stock market cycle, timing the entry of the market is the main message. So, when are you going to enter? When do you think is the best time to enter? Let me go back. Correct? Di ba? That's the most important answer. Para hindi kayo convinced. Di ba? The time is now. A correction is always the best time to enter. Okay? Whether who wins in the elections. Okay? That 1 year after only tells you that as long as there is a smooth transition of power, walang dayahan, whether matuwid or actually tuwid o tuwad, di ba? It doesn't matter. Okay? So, how do we take advantage of the situation? Appreciate the fundamentals. We've done that. Sectors to invest, we've done that. That is food, retail, and real estate, construction. Infrastructure, sobrang haba. Pero okay lang. Invest for the long term. Spend more. Where do you spend more? At save more. Diba? Konting plugging, syempre, baka nakikinig ang boss. And of course, the last, pray harder. Let's pray for the right president. Okay? But you know what worries me a lot? Is that the situation today can be very much likened to 97, 98. Okay? Because it was a turning point. Rising US interest rates, depreciation of currencies, so it means volatility. Okay? But, as investors, we should look at the bigger picture. The Philippine economy today is far different from 1997, 1998. Okay? In terms of a summary, the global growth has improved. Okay? In the early 1980s, the main players of the world were eventually US, Europe, Japan. Emerging markets like the Philippines were called the sick man of Asia. In the 90s, we talked about the Asian miracle. Singapore, Thailand, Indonesia, okay, China, that eventually created a change in the environment. Who's now leading the growth? Asia. If we go back to our history, of course, going to the trend of General Luna, bakit tayo kinanker ng mga Spaniards? Because we were, at that time, what did Rizal call us? Pearl of the Orient. Okay? We were the Bahamas of that era. Dito sila papahinga. This is their summer capital. Okay? So, now, things are also changing. This time, we might be in the cycle na tayo na yung leader. We are now moving forward. So, we're now in better shape. In 1997, I was a stockbroker. I never wanted to be a banker, but at that time, the gross international reserves of the Philippines was roughly 3 billion. Ibig sabihin, we can only afford 3-month worth of imports. Okay? The gross international reserves cushions us from foreign exchange volatility. In 2008, 2009, our GIR now is 44 billion. Tanungin niyo ako, ano na tayo ngayon? $80 billion. That's why the peso has performed well, although we're at levels of 46, 47. But it is not the number. It is the comparison against our peers. Okay? Remember that kung nagbabasa kayo ng dyaryo, ako hindi. But in terms of growth of the Philippine economy, 5 to 6% is respectable. Gusto lang natin laging mataas. But we are not one-time investors. We're long-term investors. Gusto natin slowly but surely. Diba? That's what we need to focus on. But the Philippines, despite this volatility, this is not immune to global risk. Okay, you have to think that the Philippines is like a bamboo. Diba? Lalo na ngayon, may bagyong darating. Diba? Look at the trees. Mga acacia, diba? But look at the bamboo. It sways. Okay? That's what's happening to the Philippines right now. We are still a small boat in a wide ocean. If an aircraft carrier passes by, we will be rocked. And that's what's happening. But it doesn't change our story. Okay? So corrections are opportunities to enter. And when is the right time? Now. Diba? As traders would say it, buy the rumor, sell the fact. Diba? So isipin nyo, sino ba yung gusto nyo maging presidente? Gusto nyo ba ng return of the Jedi? Oh. Diba? So isipin nyo na kung sinong Jedi yung gusto nyo bumalik. Diba? So that's the key question. But what we know so far is that people have tasted the difference of governance. That's why earlier, if you notice, I mentioned that I would liken looking at the Philippines like looking at a stock. I look for companies that think of shareholders. Number 2, I talk about the potential growth of that company. Okay? And third, I think what's sustainable. Okay? That's why I think what you should include in your portfolio, the one that has it all. Okay? This is my last slide. Thank you very much.